afternoon. I'm Safa Zaki, president of the college, and I'm so happy to be with all of you today. We opened the 222nd Convocation of Bowdoin College with an invocation offered by Oliver Goodrich, director of the Rachel Lord Center for Religious and Spiritual Life. We ask that you remain standing, if you're able, through the invocation and singing of America the Beautiful.
Good afternoon. We're gathering today as a group that represents many different backgrounds and traditions and religions. And even with our many and varied backgrounds, I would invite each of you to join me in a shared spirit of reflection and contemplation as I offer this invocation. Will you join me in a spirit of reflection? We're living through a season of human existence where the myriad problems we face each day tempt us to despair over the fate of our shared world. Perhaps some of you chose to pursue your studies at Bowdoin in hopes of better understanding and finding solutions to the most pressing problems that are facing our age and our planet, like climate collapse, wealth inequality, and access to basic supports like food, water, shelter, healthcare, and education, to name only a few. And so as you prepare to enter your studies at Bowdoin and journey toward expertise in your respective fields, my deepest hope and prayer is that you will embrace what the Zen Buddhist monk Suzuki Roshi called beginner's mind. As you meet new people, may you suspend the desire to categorize and judge them, and instead greet them with wonder and curiosity. As you grapple with challenging new ideas and concepts in your courses, may your intellectual pursuits awaken in you an unquenchable thirst for learning. As you make mistakes in the lab or on the field or in the studio, may you have the courage to learn from your failure, trusting that failure will be the gateway to new learning and insights. As you experience fear and anxiety at trying new things, whether it's your first time skiing or your first attempt with a Maine lobster, may you be overcome with the childlike joy of discovery. As you become acquainted with Maine's woods and waters and people, especially the Wabanaki who have long stewarded this land, may you become more deeply rooted in who you are and find your unique place in the vast web of belonging. And as you feel tempted to despair at the immensity of the challenges that confront our world today, may you be surprised to discover that the compassion, creativity, and capabilities you already possess are more than sufficient for the tasks at hand. May Bowdoin bless you with the gift of beginner's mind. I ask all of this in a spirit of salam, of shalom, of shanti, of peace. May it be so.
I would like now to invite singers Emma Patterson-Dennis from class of 2024, Camille Beaulieu, and Chun Wen-ko from the class of 2025 to the stage, which they're already here, to lead us in singing America the Beautiful. They will be accompanied by George Lopez on the piano. You will find the words printed on the back of your program.
Above the fruited
Thank you, that was wonderful. So please be seated. It's such a pleasure to be here with you today as we begin the academic year. I'm delighted to see, for the first time, some of my faculty colleagues, to see ones that I've met before, and to see new members of the faculty here, and of course, our newest students. This first-year class and I have already talked about how we share a special bond, a new to Bowdoin bond, and that we will find our way together. To the class of 2027, I hope your first days have gone well and that you're looking forward to the Bowdoin lobster bake tonight and to starting your classes tomorrow. I love the first day of classes, and I'm excited for you to begin this journey. As you read through your syllabi, buy your books, get your course packs, you might feel overwhelmed. Perhaps the reading and ideas seem unconnected and unfamiliar. Perhaps the assignments seem opaque and impossible. When you enter your first classroom tomorrow, you may not know the other students sitting around you. The professor may seem intimidating because of all they have accomplished. But in less than 4 months, those readings and ideas will be deeply familiar to you, and you will have developed opinions about them as well as your own ideas. Those assignments will become eminently doable. Those students who will become your intellectual interlocutors and friends, and that professor may have become someone you can turn to for help, or maybe even become a mentor. This may not happen in every single class in exactly this way, but I know that some version of this will happen in many of them, and that is why I'm so excited for you. You're going to be taking 4 discrete classes, likely, but over the course of the semester, I hope you will see how those classes are in conversation with each other. You will bring ideas and approaches from your history class into your psychology class, from your art history class into your chemistry class, from your Russian class into your government class. Your classmates will be doing the same. And in that way, the entire Bowdoin curriculum makes itself audible in every classroom. That sound of different ideas, different perspectives, different ways of knowing, different disciplinary lenses, different life experiences, that sound is the sound of the liberal arts. It is the sound we can only make together. I've spent my life in the classroom and in the lab as a student and as a teacher, and I know that every class is a unique experience. As a faculty member, I particularly love teaching the same course again and again, and seeing how different each iteration was, not because I changed the readings and assignments, although I sometimes did, but because of the personalities, life experiences, and academic interests of the students in that room that semester. Each one of those versions of those classes were different and memorable for me. Bowdoin is one of the most distinguished liberal arts colleges in the world. We have a renowned and dedicated faculty, a skilled and devoted staff, and brilliant and talented students. It's also a college in extraordinarily great shape, thanks to my predecessors, to the faculty and staff, and to the alumni and the friends of the college who hold it so dear. A lot of national attention is being paid to higher education right now. Some of that attention is useful, some is not, but important questions are being asked about access, about equity, cost, and relevance. And I am proud to be leading an institution that is always asking those questions, always evolving, and always committed to its mission. That mission is what really drew me here, and perhaps you. Here at Bowdoin, not only do students get an amazing liberal arts education, a remarkable one, but they're also pointed to the common good. We tell our graduates, you have this thing, now go do something with it. That's a message and an ethos that is truly special, and I'm really excited to be doing our work in this particular context. As you start your journey here, I'm starting mine. Over my years as a faculty member and then as an administrator, I've learned that I find it enormously exciting and rewarding to support faculty, to support students and staff in a variety of ways. To solve problems, big and small, to imagine new ways of enhancing and enriching the liberal arts experience, and to be part of an intellectual community that is deeply committed to changing lives. I come to Bowdoin eager to do this work in collaboration with all of you. Students, both returning and new, here is the advice part of my remarks. Some of you may have heard me talk about how I grew up living in several different countries. My father's work meant we moved frequently. I was always meeting new people, learning about cultures that were new to me. This experience has served me well in the classroom, in my lab, and in my administrative and leadership roles, because it has allowed me to be comfortable with differences, with people disagreeing with me, and with perspectives other than my own. Bowdoin is a community made up of people coming from different places, having different life experiences, holding different beliefs, and practicing different traditions. It is one of the great gifts of a place like this. And I hope you will embrace that gift and learn from each other. I hope you will see differences as opportunities to learn. I also hope you will seek out and participate in conversations inside and outside the classroom with as many people as you can. Learning, for sure, happens in our classrooms, in the labs and performance spaces, but it also happens in the dining halls, on sports teams, and in college houses, by working on student newspaper or volunteering in the community, and through conversations with staff across the college and with our neighbors in town. Finally, I hope you will take some risks. Take a class in a subject you know nothing about. Speak up in class, even when you're nervous or uncertain. Try out a new activity. Initiate a conversation with someone you don't know. Taking risks is, of course, risky. Things might go wrong. My last piece of advice, when things go wrong, ask for help. Share your troubles. Know that when things are difficult, this too shall pass. So I hope you will come and find me and talk to me when you are struggling. I'm hoping to be there for all of you. To my faculty and staff colleagues, you may have noticed on the program that my role today is to welcome all of you, along with our students, back to campus. But I have to say how grateful I am for the tremendously warm and generous welcome you've shown me and my family. We suspected we were joining a community where the people were truly invested in the place and the people here, and we have not been disappointed. My husband Huff and I have already come to love Brunswick and have already had so much fun exploring the surrounding area. But while it's been a wonderful summer, I've been eagerly waiting for the school year to start, as I am so looking forward to meeting as many of you as quickly as I can. Getting to know the members of this remarkable community is really the best part of this job. Thank you. I'd like now to invite Dean Lohmann to the microphone to present Voices from Bowdoin's Past.
Good afternoon. The Bowdoin Prize is the highest honor of our college. 28 years ago, on this very stage, the Bowdoin Prize was awarded to George Mitchell of the class of 1954. George, who celebrated his 90th birthday 9 days ago, grew up in Waterville, Maine's hardscrabble Head of Falls neighborhood, a triangle of land along the banks of what was then a foul-smelling Kennebec River and bordered on its other sides by a textile mill and railroad tracks. His mother was a Lebanese immigrant who could neither read nor write English. His father was the orphaned son of Irish immigrants who left school after the 4th grade and who later worked as a janitor at Colby College. According to George, their central goal in life was the education of their children. They knew the hard life of those who lacked learning, so they worked long and hard to ensure that we could go to college. Even so, George's chance at college nearly slipped away. By the time I graduated from high school, he remembered, especially hard times had hit our family. Early that year, my father lost his job. For a full year, with rising anger and declining self-esteem, he searched in vain for work. Fortunately, my mother continued to work as a weaver in a textile mill on the night shift. That kept us going, but it was a difficult, tense year. For the first few months, there was no talk of college. Eventually, at the recommendation of his father's former boss, George was encouraged to look into Bowdoin. A week later, I set off for Brunswick. I was 16 years old, totally naive, had traveled little outside of Waterville, had never been on a train or a plane. My parents didn't have a car, so I got up very early in the morning and walked to the outskirts of Waterville to hitchhike to Brunswick. Within minutes, I got a ride. After he heard my story, the driver took me right to the Bowdoin campus. Since I was several hours early for my appointment, I walked back and forth across the entire campus. I can still recall my feeling of awe. Years later, George remembered meeting that day with the Dean of Admissions. Although I was very nervous, as out of place as a fish out of water, he made me feel at home. When I told him that my parents couldn't afford tuition payments, he was reassuring. "Don't worry," he said. "If you're willing to work, we'll figure something out." And he did. He helped me with several part-time jobs, which combined with some scholarship assistance, enabled me to get through. Not only did George Mitchell get through, he used his education and the opportunities it produced to achieve one of the most stunning success stories of any Bowdoin graduate. Following an early career as a lawyer, an aide to U.S. Senator Ed Muskie, and a brief stint as a federal judge, George Mitchell was appointed and then elected in his own right to the U.S. State Senate. He would go on to serve for 12 years as Senate Majority Leader and would later turn down an appointment to the U.S. Supreme Court to pursue and achieve peace in Northern Ireland. He is the former chairman of Disney and a former special envoy for Middle East peace. George also led the 2006 investigation on steroid use by Major League Baseball players, and he counts the Mitchell Institute as his proudest accomplishment, an organization he founded in 1999 to increase the likelihood that young people from every community in Maine will aspire to pursue and achieve a college education. George Mitchell was a history major at Bowdoin, and it's through the lens of history that he sees the world today. American democracy, he has said, like all democracies, depend upon informed and rational public debate for successful operation and ultimate survival. When public debate is filled with falsehoods, with wild allegations of conspiracies, when the simple assertion of a charge is deemed sufficient to repeat over and over, all of us need critical reasoning skills to distinguish fiction from reality, fantasy from fact. It is only through critical thought, logical reasoning, careful definition, and open debate that citizens can hope to see past the blur of information to the realities on which their choices must be made. And it is these reasoning skills that are the most important contribution of a higher education. They provide the critical lubricant of society, without which contradictory claims cannot be reconciled. The ability to reason, to think clearly, to examine old assumptions and rebut misleading argument is an essential counterweight to the assault of information and misinformation with which we are bombarded every day. Higher education is the only institution in our society which has as its critical purpose the continued re-examine of our society's assumptions, the constant review of the past, and the never-ending search for a better future. George's reflection on Bowdoin further emphasizes these ideals. Throughout its history, Bowdoin has served the people of Maine and the nation by opening the eyes and minds of students to the wonders of the world we live and to the limitless possibilities open to those who combine knowledge, energy, and a willingness to risk with a commitment to the common good. I was one of those fortunate young men, and as I have said often, one of the luckiest days of my life was when I first set foot on this beautiful campus. There's little certainty in life, but of this I am certain. My life would have been much different and far less had I not come to Bowdoin. The words of Senator George Mitchell, class of 1954.
Thank you, Janet. It is now my pleasure to invite Tony Ignacio from class of 2026 and George Lopez to the stage. They're not here yet, that's good. To perform today's musical interlude, Claude Debussy's La Fille aux Cheveux de Lin, transcribed for violin and piano. As we officially open the academic year, it's our custom at Convocation to invite a member of our faculty to share insight into an important issue. Professor of Government and Asian Studies, Henry Laurence, is a political scientist and scholar whose research and teaching interests fall around the interplay of governments and markets and comparative and media politics. He's written and spoken on subjects ranging from censorship to Brexit, the monarchy, the political economy of Pokemon Go. His most recent book is The Politics of Public Broadcasting in Britain and Japan, the BBC and NHK Compared. In what might seem a departure from what I just described, Professor Laurence is here this afternoon to share with us the lessons he's learned after unexpectedly encountering a porcupine. Please join me in welcoming Professor Henry Laurence.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction, I think. I'm deeply honored on behalf of all of my faculty colleagues to welcome President Zaki, our new colleagues at the faculty, and most especially you, the class of 2027, to Bowdoin, welcome. I am mindful of the fact that there is now only me standing between you and a delicious lobster dinner, so let's keep it quick. I hope to tell you the story of seeing a wild porcupine. And by the end of the talk, I hope you'll appreciate the irony and double meaning of that statement. But for now, you're probably wondering, why? So let's dive in. The story begins just after dawn, about 3 years ago, a few weeks into the pandemic. I was, and am, especially vulnerable to COVID. So my doctors had ordered me to avoid people wherever possible. And I was getting exercise in the form of very, very early morning walks in deserted places. On this day, it was Cape Furbish Preserve. That's just a few minutes south of here. You go down the Harpswell Road, take a right just before you get to the Five Guys Burgers, take a left shortly after Wild Oats Bakery, which does great cupcakes and salads, if you like cupcakes and salads, and there you are. The trail was beautiful, but I was feeling pretty sorry for myself, what with the general awfulness of the world, on top of my own health problems, and the enforced isolation. Things were about to get a whole lot worse. I rounded a corner and I found myself face to face with a massive, horrible, scary-looking porcupine perched in the branches of a Douglas fir tree just off the trail, about head height off the ground. It was covered in thousands of gigantic needles and it had razor blades instead of feet. And it was staring into my eyes like it was crouched, preparing to jump at my face. I was scared out of my wits. I was terrified, or as we like to say around here, I was outside my comfort zone. I'd never seen a porcupine before. We don't have them in England. We have hedgehogs, which is a bit like comparing Paddington Bear to Cocaine Bear. So, those of you nostalgic for your SAT analogies, there's one right there. And for some reason, I genuinely thought that they can shoot their quills at you. I thought that. So I froze, waiting for the flying quills of doom, and desperately trying to remember whether with porcupines you stared them down and made yourself big, or avoided eye contact and curled up into the fetal position, which is what I felt like doing. And as miserable as I'd been at the start of the walk, things were now about 1,000 times worse. Spoiler alert, porcupines don't shoot their quills. As I later discovered, they're very gentle and they're very passive unless they're attacked or dating. They have very retro dating habits, the less said about which the better. They're not predators, they're vegans, they eat bark, shoots and leaves. And yes, I've tried turning that into a clever punctuation joke about Oxford commas, and no, it can't be done. If you can do it, let me know, and I'll put you on my Instagram page, which is, you'll be surprised to hear, porcupine-themed. To be clear, the quills are very dangerous if you do get too close and if you go out of your way to provoke them, but basically, if you don't mess with them, they won't mess with you. And as you've guessed, ever since that encounter, I've been doing a ton of research on porcupines, and there is a load of amazing stuff that I would love to tell you about. Unfortunately, this isn't the time or the place, and as my wife has reminded me on more than one occasion, I'm not a biologist or a naturalist, and I am not remotely qualified to talk about porcupines. And in fact, Sarah warned me about that. She said someone might call me out on it, and I didn't realize, and I don't think she did, that that person would be Professor Zaki just now. But here we are. I'm going to share a story about Sigmund Freud and some porcupines, but because it's a banger, but also because it's really insightful, yeah, and important. We're back in 1909 in Vienna. Sigmund Freud is developing revolutionary new ideas about psychoanalysis, and he wants to bring them to a wider audience than just Vienna. And also, he wants to make a lot of money. So he figured he needed to go to America to do both of those things. So he wrangled himself a speaking gig and an honorary degree at Clark University in Worcester, Mass. But he didn't want to admit why he was going, partly because he didn't want to look crass and commercial, and also apparently he was really, really nervous about whether his mission would succeed or not. So, whenever anyone asked him why he was going to America, he told them that he hoped to see a wild porcupine because he'd never seen one before. Now, his friends, many of whom, of course, were psychoanalysts themselves, saw straight through the subterfuge. And pretty soon, in European intellectual circles, the expression, finding your porcupine, came to refer to anyone who was basically trying to deflect their anxieties about their true hopes and fears. And we'll come back to that. But the theme, as some of you know, wasn't as off-brand as it seemed, because as a few years earlier, the German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer had famously used porcupines as an allegory to explain the entire human condition. Freud had loved the idea and later developed it in his book, Group Psychology and the Analysis of the Ego. So this is Freud quoting Schopenhauer on the so-called porcupine's dilemma. And I want you to listen carefully, because I think it's off. Listen carefully. This is the paraphrase of the porcupine's dilemma. A company of porcupines crowded themselves very close together one cold winter's day so as to profit from one another's warmth and so save themselves from being frozen to death. But soon they felt each other's quills, which induced them to separate again. And then, when the need for warmth arose once more, it brought them nearer together, when the second evil arose once more. And so they were driven back and forwards from one trouble to the other until they discovered a mean distance at which they could tolerably exist. In the same way, the need for company drives humans together only to be mutually repelled by the many prickly and disagreeable qualities of their nature. In other words, for humans, loneliness is unbearable, but real intimacy is impossible. I'm English, so I don't know anything about the human condition. But from a purely porcupine's point of view, that parable is complete malarkey. For one thing, it's just factually wrong, okay? Porcupines don't behave like that. And also, while we're at it, it's not a company of porcupines, it's a prickle of porcupines. Just more importantly, it doesn't actually make any logical sense if you roll it around your brain for a couple of minutes. For one thing, if porcupines can't deal with a cold day in winter, why do they live in Maine? Don't laugh too hard, you'll be asking yourself the same question in about 3 months. Second, I don't want to be indelicate here in this otherwise classy occasion, but if porcupines can't get close to each other because of all the sharp prickles, do you see where I'm headed? How do you think we get more porcupines? Yeah, you'd think Freud would have thought of that. But my hunch is that maybe he actually wasn't doing much thinking. Maybe he was just repeating what he'd heard or what everyone knows. And we'll get back to that too. But back with Freud, he gave his talks at Clark, but then instead of going to schmooze and market his brand in some major city like Manhattan or DC or Brunswick, see what I did there, he accepted an invitation to visit a rustic camp in the Adirondacks in upstate New York to hang out with a neurology professor at Harvard and some other stands. That's admirers for people in the front 3 rows. And eventually, during this stay, they were eating griddle cakes and going on hikes, and someone found a porcupine. They ran back into the camp and said, "We found a porcupine." And the story goes that Freud was super excited. He booked out of his cabin, top speed to check it out. But when they got closer, they realized that it was a porcupine, but it had been dead for several days. And apparently, the story goes, Freud walked slowly up to the decomposing carcass, prodded it with his walking stick, and said, "It's dead." And a few days after that, he went back to Austria and never came back to America. back to the original story. I'm still on the trail. I'm scared out of my wits. But after a while, I noticed that the air wasn't exactly thick with flying quills. I wasn't under attack. The porcupine was just kind of hanging out on her branch, as they do, staring at me sort of quizzically. And then she got bored. Pretty quickly she got bored. That happens. And she went back to sleep, leaving me mesmerized, but also captivated. And so I headed straight home, straight to the library, and I started reading. Anyway, I've returned to the trail often after that to see porcupines and update my Insta. And I genuinely think that the porcupines, which I saw pretty regularly, not every time, but pretty regularly after that, got me through a really, really bleak time. So maybe Schopenhauer was right after all in a strange sort of way. And I also started seeing porcupines on a lot of my other walks as well that I'd been doing before the pandemic. They'd been there all along. I just hadn't looked for them. So what's the moral? I think the tale raises several points. You saw what I did there, right? It's a play on words. Okay. The unplanned encounter and my subsequent fascination with all things porcupine was another visceral lesson in what it means to count nature a familiar acquaintance and to lose myself in generous enthusiasms. It reminded me of the transformative power of learning for its own sake, not for a grade or for publication, but simply because the world is endlessly fascinating and none of us knows more than a tiny, tiny fraction about it. You'll recall my wife telling me that I'm not qualified to talk about porcupines. She's right, I'm not. But I am, we all are, qualified to learn about them. Now, you may be sensing with dread that this is about to turn into one of those speeches where you're told to follow your passions. Don't worry, it's not. The advice isn't wrong, but what do you do with it when you discover your true passion when you're 57? And it's porcupines. I leave you to figure that out for yourself. Actually, I should note in all seriousness that my true passion is, of course, my amazing wife, Sarah, who is over there with us today, as is my amazing son, Colin, who isn't here today, and my amazing daughter, Gemma, who is a singer, and will be here at Bowdoin doing a gig next week, the next Phoebe Bridgers. You should all go. I can't believe I got away with that dad brag. Maybe I didn't. Second point, back to the story. If you're thinking that the real message of the talk is beware of strange old men with European accents mansplaining porcupines, then congratulations, that's exactly the point. You'll do fine. Put another way, and you've heard this already before on the stage today, always be skeptical. Ask questions. We all believe a lot of nonsense just because we heard it one time or because everyone knows something's true. Porcupines shoot their quills. Porcupines huddle together for warmth. You have to double major. Only economists get good jobs. I can't dance. The professor is always right. It's all too easy to project what you want to believe onto something that you don't really understand just to fit your narrative did, as Freud did with his preposterous porcupine parable. And I'm very proud of that. Keep questioning your beliefs and assumptions. Keep an open mind, look for the evidence, and check that it all makes sense. Third point, be honest with yourself and with everyone else about what your true goals are, what you genuinely want out of college and out of life. Don't ever be afraid of what other people think. As my dad says, there's really only one competition in life that matters, and that's the competition between you and the person you want to become. Don't waste your time searching for metaphorical porcupines. That said, I do strongly recommend that you go out and search for actual real porcupines, by which I really mean go out and explore. Find out about Brunswick, explore Maine. It's an amazing, beautiful, incredible state. It's a wonderful world waiting for you right off campus. Don't waste your time, enjoy it. Finally, and most importantly, don't worry. Things which may seem really intimidating at first, porcupines, a campus full of strangers, maybe even your professors looking at these guys, they usually turn out to be really great once you get to know them a bit. You guys, you theatre full of smart, expectant, no doubt wonderful people, you all probably don't self-identify as scary. but I've been terrified of you for weeks, ever since I found out about this course. Yet here we are, and maybe I needn't have been. Class of 2027, welcome to Bowdoin. We wish you every success, and we look forward to meeting you in class tomorrow. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Henry. That was really amazing. Thanks also to our musicians George Lopez, Timothy Ignacio, and our singers Emma Patterson Dennis, Camille Beaulieu, and Chun Won Ko for sharing their incredible talents with us this afternoon. Following Convocation, I invite all faculty and staff to join us for a reception on the lawn at Cleveland House to welcome our new faculty and staff colleagues to Bowdoin. Also, students are reminded that dinner tonight is the annual lobster bake, which begins at 5 p.m. on Fardley Fieldhouse. With that, I declare the college to be open for our 222nd academic year. May it be a year of discovery, inspiration, and achievement. And I'm so happy that George Lopez and our singers are back to the stage to lead us in the singing of Raise Songs to Bowdoin. Please stand if you're able, and please remain at your seat until the recessional march has left the theater.